Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought my dream home with a private pool, I thought I had found the perfect place to live. But the moment I tried to enjoy it, Karen, the HOA president, barged in, demanding I follow her ridiculous rules. I refused, and that's when the real war began. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall perfectly into place. Buying this house felt like one of those moments. After years of grinding away at my job, saving every penny, I had finally secured my dream home, a spacious, sunlit property with a gorgeous backyard complete with a large private pool. It wasn't just any house. It was mine, free from the overbearing control of suburban micromanagement. When I first toured the neighborhood, I knew it was part of a homeowners association, HOA, but my realtor assured me this house was an exception. The previous owners had legally opted out of the HOA years ago, meaning I had all the perks of a great location without the nonsense of excessive rules, nosy committees, and pointless fees. The deal was perfect, and within weeks, I had the keys in my hands. The first few days in the house were bliss. I spent my time unpacking, setting up my home office, and imagining the life I'd build here, but the real highlight was the pool. It was pristine, deep blue, with a sleek tile border, a true escape from the relentless summer heat. And today, after a long, exhausting week of work and unpacking, I was finally going to enjoy it. I set everything up perfectly: a chilled beer, a playlist of my favorite songs, and a comfortable lounge chair beside the water. Slipping into the pool, I let the coolness wash over me, the tension in my muscles melting away. This was exactly why I bought this house: freedom, peace, and privacy. Then I heard it. A sharp metallic click of my backyard gate unlocking. I turned toward the sound, confused. Who the hell was just walking onto my property like they owned the place? And then she appeared. A woman, mid-50s, blonde bob haircut, sunglasses perched high on her nose, and an expression that screamed self-importance, strode confidently across my yard like a warden inspecting an inmate. She was clutching a clipboard, her lips pressed into a thin, unimpressed line. I stood up in the water, blinking in disbelief. "Can I help you?" I called out, shaking the water from my hair. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stopped just short of the pool's edge and let out an exaggerated sigh, as if she was already deeply disappointed in me. "I'm Karen Walker, president of the HOA," she announced, adjusting the pen in her hand like a weapon. "And you're in violation of our community regulations." I stared at her, half amused, half irritated. "What?" Karen exhaled sharply, flipping through her notes as if she was about to read me my rights. "This pool," she gestured dramatically, "is not authorized for use until it has been inspected and approved by the HOA's Regulations Committee. You need to submit the proper forms, schedule an evaluation, and pay the community access fee before you can legally swim here." I let out a short laugh, thinking, surely she's joking. "Lady, I don't think you understand. I'm not part of your HOA. This house was exempt before I bought it. That means your rules don't apply to me." Her lips pursed into a tight scowl. "That's a common misunderstanding," she snapped. "All homes in this community must adhere to the HOA's policies, regardless of past agreements." Oh, so this was going to be a thing. I climbed out of the pool, not bothering to hide my irritation, and grabbed my towel. "Karen, right?" I said, drying my face. "I respect whatever little kingdom you think you're running here, but this property is legally outside of your control. My pool is my business, and I don't need your approval for anything." Her nostrils flared. "If you refuse to comply, we'll be forced to issue citations. Failure to adhere to community guidelines can result in fines and further legal action." "Great," I said, smirking. "Feel free to waste your time on that." Her face twitched, as if she wasn't used to being challenged. "You're making a mistake." "No, you are," I countered, stepping closer. "You just trespassed onto private property. That gate you walked through, locked. So next time, maybe knock on my front door instead of pretending this is your backyard." Karen's expression darkened. "You'll regret this." I let out an exaggerated yawn. "Doubt it. Now, if you don't mind, get the hell off my property." She stood there for a long moment, fuming, as if expecting me to back down. When I didn't, she turned sharply on her heel and stormed out the gate, slamming it shut behind her. I exhaled, shaking my head. What the hell was that? This was my first encounter with Karen Walker, but it sure as hell wasn't going to be the last. I should have known that Karen Walker wouldn't just walk away and let me live in peace. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab my mail, still half asleep and expecting the usual junk flyers and bills. Instead, an official-looking envelope with an HOA logo was shoved into my mailbox. I frowned, tearing it open. Inside was a citation for $500, listing my supposed violation as unauthorized use of a community water feature. I stared at the paper, almost laughing at the sheer audacity of it. They really thought they could fine me for swimming in my own pool. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA's office number, which unsurprisingly led me straight to Karen. "Mr. Miller," she answered in that sickly sweet, condescending tone. "I assume you received your citation." "Oh, I received it all right. And I assume you know this is complete bullshit? Our regulations are in place to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood." "Karen, let me make this crystal clear. I am not part of your HOA. Your citation is about as valid as a monopoly fine. Failure to pay will result in additional penalties," she continued, ignoring me completely. "Should this continue, a lien may be placed against your property." I nearly choked on my own breath. A lien. These people were delusional. "Try it, Karen, I dare you. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." And with that, I hung up. But that was just the beginning. That evening, I returned home from work, looking forward to another relaxing dip in my pool. As I stepped outside, my heart dropped. The once crystal clear water had turned into a cloudy, chemical-filled mess. A strong, almost metallic smell burned my nose. The filter was still running, but it was clear. Someone had dumped something into my pool. I checked my security cameras, and there it was. 2 guys in HOA-branded polo shirts sneaking into my yard at night, dumping what looked like an entire bucket of chlorine into the water. I clenched my jaw. So, they wanted to play dirty? Fine. I immediately called a pool cleaning service to drain and refill it, and while they worked, I hatched a plan. First, I installed motion-activated floodlights and upgraded my cameras to send instant alerts to my phone. Then, I printed out a big, bold sign and attached it to my fence. "Trespassers will be recorded and reported to the police." HOA has no jurisdiction here. For good measure, I also filed a police report for vandalism and handed over the footage. Let's see how Karen liked that. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of metal clanging. I rushed outside, only to find 2 city workers standing at my gate, holding a clipboard. "Sir, we received a complaint about your pool not meeting local safety standards." "Let me guess," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "Karen sent you?" One of them hesitated before nodding. "We've been getting a lot of complaints from the HOA about your property." I exhaled sharply, already feeling the headache forming. "All right. Do you see anything unsafe?" "Not really," one admitted, "but we still have to document everything." That was when I had an idea. "Perfect. Since you're here, let's do a full inspection." They looked at me, confused. "I want a documented city-stamped report stating that my pool and property meet every single regulation. If HOA tries this again, I'll have proof that their complaints are fabricated." The inspectors agreed, went through their checklist, and signed off on everything. An hour later, I had a certified report from the city that my pool was fully compliant. And the best part, I mailed a copy directly to the HOA's office, with a sticky note attached, "Nice try, Karen. See you at my next pool party." Karen wasn't done. The following week, I received 5 separate noise complaints from the HOA, claiming I was disturbing the peace with my late-night parties. This was funny, considering I hadn't even had a single party yet. So I decided to fix that. That Friday night, I invited a small group of friends over. Nothing crazy, just some drinks, music, and a relaxed night by the pool. The music was at a reasonable volume, laughter filled the air, and for once, I actually felt like I was enjoying my home. Then, right on schedule, red and blue flashing lights lit up my yard. Karen had called the cops on me. This was exactly what I was waiting for. I calmly greeted the officers, and, before they could even speak, I handed them the city's official report, the HOA's false citations, and the security footage of the previous vandalism. The lead officer flipped through the documents, then sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sir, we apologize for the inconvenience. This is clearly a misuse of emergency services." Then he turned to Karen, who was standing smugly near her porch, waiting for my downfall. "Ma'am, if you continue filing false reports, you will be charged with harassment and obstruction of law enforcement." The look on her face, priceless. At this point, I knew one thing. Karen wasn't going to stop. She was too arrogant, too convinced that she held all the power. But I wasn't just some pushover. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. I had the proof. False citations, unauthorized trespassing, vandalism, caught-on-camera fake complaints to the city misuse of emergency services. And I had one final move. I was going to sue the HOA. This war was just getting started. After weeks of harassment, sabotage, and ridiculous citations, I was beyond fed up. HOA had thrown everything they had at me, and I had countered every move. The false fines? Useless. The city inspections? I had official reports clearing me of violations. The noise complaints? Fabricated and dismissed. But I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. So when I invited a few friends over for a low-key Friday night by the pool, I had a feeling something was coming. And sure enough, she didn't disappoint. It was the perfect night. The air was warm, the pool lights cast a soft blue glow over the water, and the gentle hum of music set the mood. My friends and I sat around the pool, sipping drinks, grilling food, and actually enjoying my damn house for once. Then, just as I took a sip of my beer, red and blue lights flashed against my fence. I sighed, placing my drink down. Right on time. 2 police cruisers rolled up to my driveway, their headlights slicing through the night. My friends exchanged wary glances, and I could already hear my neighbor whispering, "What the hell?" I stood up, stretched my arms, and turned toward the entrance, completely unfazed. And there she was, Karen, standing smugly at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face, watching like she was about to witness my downfall. One of the officers stepped forward, scanning the scene. "Sir, we received a noise complaint about a large, disruptive party at this residence." I glanced around. 6 people, some light music, and the occasional burst of laughter. Hardly a riot. I chuckled. "Really? This is what you were called out for?" The officer sighed. "We're just responding to the report. Are you the homeowner?" "Oh, absolutely. And let me guess who filed the complaint." I turned toward Karen, who was suddenly very interested in the ground beneath her feet. The second officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we need to make sure there's no disturbance." I grinned. "Oh, by all means. Let me make your job easier." And with that, I pulled out a thick folder of documents from the patio table. My ace in the hole. City inspection report confirming my pool was compliant. Security footage proving prior HOA harassment. False citations they had sent me, all legally invalid. An official letter from my lawyer stating that Karen and the HOA had no jurisdiction over my property. I handed the officer the stack. "Before you waste any more of your time, I'd suggest you take a look at these." They flipped through the papers, their expressions shifting from neutral to mildly annoyed. Then, the first officer turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, is this your signature on these complaints?" Karen stiffened, lips pressed into a thin line. "I was simply enforcing community standards." "Ma'am, this residence is not part of the HOA. You have no authority here." But the noise," she stammered. The officer sighed. "We're standing here right now, and there's no excessive noise. Calling the police under false pretenses is a serious offense." Karen's smirk vanished. Then the officer pulled out his ticket book. "Ma'am, I'm issuing you a formal warning for misusing emergency services. If this happens again, you'll be fined." Her face turned beet red. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "He's ruining our community. He's—" The officer held up a hand. "Enough. We're done here." He turned back to me, nodding. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir. Have a good night." I smiled. "You too, officer. Thanks for handling this." As the police cars drove away, Karen stood frozen in place, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might break a tooth. Then she stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. My friends burst into laughter. "Dude, did you just legally school the HOA in front of the cops?" That was the best thing I've ever seen. I raised my drink. To Karen, "Thanks for the entertainment." We clinked glasses and returned to enjoying the night. But as I leaned back in my chair, watching Karen's lights flicker off, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't done. This was war, and I had just won the biggest battle yet. Karen had crossed the line for the last time. The false citations, the harassment, the attempted vandalism, and now calling the cops on my private gathering. It was time to end this once and for all. I had spent weeks documenting everything, collecting evidence, and preparing my case. And now I was suing the HOA for harassment, defamation, and unlawful attempts to extort money from a non-member. The lawsuit shook the neighborhood. The HOA had ruled over this community with an iron fist for years, and many of my neighbors at first weren't on my side. They had bought into the illusion of the HOA's control, convinced that its existence protected their property values and kept the neighborhood exclusive. I overheard murmurs, people wondering why I was being so difficult, why I couldn't just play along like everyone else. But then the truth started to spread. Neighbors who had been skeptical at first started asking questions. Some had already been fed up with Karen's relentless control, but now they were seeing just how far she was willing to go. When I started sharing evidence of my surveillance footage, the HOA trespassing, Karen filing false reports, and even trying to illegally impose fines on my property, the tide began to turn. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Several neighbors showed up, not just out of curiosity, but because they too had been victims of Karen's overreach. Some came forward with their own stories: fines for leaving their garbage cans out 5 minutes too long, citations for using the wrong shade of beige on their fences, and even threats against families for putting up holiday decorations deemed too flashy. The judge sat down and glanced at my evidence, flipping through the mountain of paperwork I had compiled. He looked over at Karen, then back at me. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "you claim that the HOA has been harassing you, despite the fact that your property is legally not part of the association. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing tall. "The HOA has been unlawfully trying to enforce rules on my property, despite my legal exemption. They have sent me fake fines, trespassed on my property, vandalized my pool, and even called the police on me under false pretenses." Karen, sitting at the defendant's table, looked pale but defiant. Her lawyer, a stiff-looking man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the HOA was merely trying to uphold community standards. Mr. Miller's defiance creates disorder." The judge held up a hand, silencing him. "Let's talk about those community standards. Mr. Miller, you claim the HOA attempted to fine you?" I nodded and handed over the stacks of notices, each one stamped with official HOA insignia, each one completely illegitimate. The judge frowned. "Ms. Walker, do you have any legal basis for these citations?" Karen swallowed hard. "Well, technically." "No, not technically. Either this homeowner is a part of your HOA and bound by its rules, or he is not." She hesitated for a second too long. The judge exhaled sharply. "That's what I thought." I wasn't done. I pulled out the city's inspection report, proving that Karen had falsely reported violations to municipal authorities. "Your Honor, Karen Walker deliberately misled city officials, claiming my pool was unsafe when an official inspection proved otherwise. She has been using her position to fabricate complaints and intimidate homeowners into compliance." The judge's expression hardened. "Ms. Walker, you filed complaints with the city under false pretenses." Karen's lawyer shuffled uncomfortably. "There may have been a misunderstanding." The judge wasn't buying it. "And the police reports," I continued, "the numerous calls she made against me and others, wasting law enforcement's time." The judge glanced at the officers in the room, the same ones who had been called to my house multiple times. One of them stood up. "Your Honor, we can confirm that multiple calls were made from Ms. Walker's residence regarding Mr. Miller's home. Each time, we found no legal violations. It became evident that these calls were intended to harass rather than report any real issue." At this, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Karen shrunk in her seat. The neighbors watching from the gallery were now glaring at her. Even her most loyal supporters, the ones who had defended the HOA's strict policies, were starting to realize they had been manipulated. The judge leaned forward, rubbing his temple. "This is not only a case of overreach, but outright abuse of power. Ms. Walker, your actions have placed undue stress on a homeowner who is not even under your jurisdiction. This HOA has acted outside its legal boundaries and engaged in harassment." Then he delivered his final blow. "I am ruling in favor of Mr. Miller. The HOA will immediately cease all enforcement actions against his property and pay him $50,000 in damages. Furthermore, Ms. Walker, you are removed from your position as HOA president, effective immediately." Karen let out a strangled gasp. The courtroom erupted. Some neighbors cheered, while others sat in stunned silence, processing the fact that the queen of the HOA had just been dethroned. But the biggest shock came the next day. Dozens of homeowners, many of whom had once been staunch HOA supporters, started resigning from the association. The once feared HOA was crumbling, its membership shrinking by the hour. By the end of the week, the HOA was functionally dead. Karen, she disappeared, vanished from the neighborhood within a month, selling her house at a loss. No one saw her again. And just like that, the HOA was no more. The fall of Karen and the HOA was swift and absolute. The very next morning after the verdict, the neighborhood felt different, as if the air itself had shifted. The once smug supporters of the HOA, those who had whispered about me being a troublemaker, were eerily silent. People avoided eye contact, some still reeling from the revelation that they had been blindly following a fraud. Karen's house, once a symbol of power, now sat like a tombstone. Dark curtains drawn, the driveway empty. No more HOA meetings in her pristine backyard. No more Karen storming through the neighborhood like she was some kind of suburban overlord. She had been publicly humiliated, and the weight of it was crushing her. Word spread fast that Karen had listed her house for sale at a significant loss. In a market where homes in this neighborhood should have been worth a fortune, hers sat untouched for weeks. The very people she had controlled now wanted nothing to do with her. The same neighbors who once groveled at her feet now crossed the street to avoid her. And then came the final blow. One afternoon, I was in my backyard, enjoying my pool in peace for the first time in months when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of movers. I stood up, towel in hand, and walked to my fence, peering over. There she was, Karen standing in her driveway, watching as movers carried out her expensive furniture, her designer decor, the very essence of the empire she had built here. She looked smaller somehow, defeated. The crisp, confident woman who had once tried to run my life now looked like a ghost of herself. She must have felt my gaze because she turned. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then, without a word, she turned away, climbed into her overpriced luxury SUV, and slammed the door. The engine roared to life, and without so much as a final glance, Karen sped off, leaving behind the ruins of her reign. But the destruction didn't stop with her. The HOA, once a dominant force, was now collapsing from within. Without Karen at the helm, it became a sinking ship. Board members started quitting one by one, some out of shame, others to avoid potential legal repercussions. A financial audit revealed a horrifying truth. Karen had been misusing HOA funds for years. Lavish dinners, personal vacations, expensive home upgrades, all paid for with the money she had squeezed out of homeowners. As this scandal unraveled, more and more residents began pulling out of the HOA, refusing to pay another dime into the corrupt system Karen had built. Within a month, the HOA was officially dissolved. No leadership, no funds, nothing left to enforce their ridiculous rules. The oppressive reign of the HOA had ended, and I won. For the first time since moving in, I finally felt at home. With Karen gone and the HOA nothing more than a bad memory, the neighborhood felt alive in a way it never had before. People who once whispered behind closed doors now greeted each other openly. Some even came to my house apologizing for not standing up to Karen sooner, admitting that they had feared retaliation. It didn't matter. I wasn't holding grudges. We had all been prisoners of her rule, and now we were free. The best part: no more absurd rules, no more fines for leaving a car in the driveway, no more restrictions on paint colors or holiday decorations. People finally started living in their own homes instead of feeling like tenants in Karen's personal kingdom. Kids played outside without the fear of noise complaints. Families hosted cookouts without someone lurking around with a clipboard. The neighborhood had changed, and for the better. As for me, I did exactly what I had fought for. I enjoyed my damn pool. No more threats, no more harassment, just cold beer, good company, and the satisfaction of knowing I had won. I had stood my ground, and in doing so, I had given the entire neighborhood back its voice. The lesson? Never let people like Karen control your life. Know your rights, fight for them, and most importantly, never back down from what's yours.